Welcome to the Edexlive Podcast by the New Indian Express. Today we are joined by Bhrigu Uppal, a grade 12 student at Sanskriti School, Delhi, who is revolutionizing waste management through Project SenseFly, a drone-based initiative that monitors harmful landfill gases in real time. His patented sensor drone technology, backed by scientific research and government recognition, is already deployed across major Indian landfill sites. With innovations like zeolite-based methane reduction and active policy advocacy, Bhrigu is driving sustainable change at the intersection of science, technology, and environmental justice. Hi, Bhrigu. It's such a pleasure to have you on the Edexlive podcast today. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing perfectly well. And yeah, I'm really looking forward.
Wonderful. So, to begin with, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and, the inception of the idea and how it came about? What inspired that?
So basically, the idea of Project SenseFly came up in grade 9. Basically, what was happening was that it was for the first time that I was going from Delhi to Chandigarh in a road trip. And Chandigarh is my hometown, and that's why I was going over there. And during the trip, I looked at mountains, which surprisingly came up so early, which was quite surprising because, in fact, those mountains weren't actually mountains. Those were huge piles of waste. Felt that it wasn't the right way to actually store waste. And upon getting closer, I also saw small people, tiny people working on the landfill without any safety equipment. And I was aware that working with waste and during waste isn't great because it releases a lot of gases and it isn't safe for them. And when I came back from the trip, I researched about it, and that's how Project SenseFly started.
Wonderful. So, building a drone that detects gases sounds super complex. What do you think was the hardest part about actually making it work?
So basically, whenever anybody makes a DIY drone at their homes, the hardest part is usually making it fly. Making it fly, when I say that, I basically mean that coding the speed controllers in such a way that they balance the amount of power that they send to each motor. And when that happens, it actually allows for a stable flight. And that was the hardest part. And even in my project, it was much harder because in Project SenseFly, there is a sensor box mounted on the drone. The drone not only had to support its weight, but also the weight of the sensor box. When that happens, it was not working at first. Eventually, I read up some literature. I remember reading a research paper based on mathematical modeling and finding the center of mass. Eventually, I reached up to the solution that instead of using just one string to tie the sensor box on the drone, I'll use four string and let it balance by itself.
Right. And what was your first reaction when you saw it work? It must have been such a nice feeling, right?
Yeah, it was such a nice feeling. I wanted to clap, but I couldn't because I had the controller in my hands.
So, how did you figure out that zeolite could reduce methane by 20%? Was it a trial and error thing, or did you follow a specific process?
So basically, finding about zeolite's efficiency was actually part of the research component of Project SenseFly. So after creating the drone and the sensor box, I actually was struck by a question that what next? What can I do now to actually reduce methane emissions? Because this device can only detect methane, right? Then I started reading up stuff on Google, and I found that overlaying certain substances on waste can actually trap the harmful gases within the waste and actually lead to reduction in methane emissions. So I read up somewhere and made a list of 4 to 5 materials which are known to reduce methane emissions, but these materials weren't actually readily available in India, and thus I had to read up the characteristics of these materials and find something that was actually available in India. And finally, we had come up with zeolite, biocharcoal, and after that, what we did was I designed an experiment in which I divided the domestic waste into two bins. One was the experimental bin and one was the control bin. I overlaid each material on the experiment bin and monitored it over a period of 6 hours. And finally, putting through the results, I found that zeolite was most efficient out of all, and it reduced the emissions by 20%.
Awesome. So, I just wanted to know what are certain inspirations or ideas or books that you read that helped you solve this current problem? Was there any research that you did? Can you just take us through that?
Zeolite is basically used in water ponds, in fish ponds, where it acts like alum and it uses contaminants in the water, but it was never tested with waste and reducing gases in landfill areas. And that's what I guess I did as part of a researcher and contributed to the society.
Right, absolutely. So now moving on to on ground impact. Can you tell me if you've gotten any kind of reactions from real people that you have offered your services to, and what's it been like? What's their reaction been like?
So overall, I've got a positive response from all of them, and that was because they were very excited to see a drone which can actually fly and a solution that can solve a major problem coming from a high schooler like me. And basically, what my model included was renting out the drone to these landfills for a week or two and allowing them to use them properly and integrate it to their system. I gave them a website in which they can see the map of the landfill and see where the methane gas emissions is more. And they can also see the before and after methane gas levels after the solution of zeolite.
So, do you see your technology more in a local scale, or do you also see it having global implications as well?
Well, I would say it can definitely be used in other countries, but it was obviously developed in the context of India because in developed countries like United States and United Kingdom, such solutions already exist, and my solution can actually be a cost-effective enhancer which can enhance the solution over there. But it won't be such a big problem solver as it is in India. But in other countries like Indonesia and other African countries and South American countries, obviously it can be a big update to their system to solve methane emissions.
Absolutely. Now, all of this thinking must be taking up a lot of your energy. What do you do to unwind? Because I know that big ideas need a lot of energy. So, how do you recharge?
Basically, for this project, this was a huge project. It has become huge now, but when it started, it was just a drone with some sensors on it. So what happened was I started this project in grade 9, and what actually led this project to become big was consistency. I started in grade 9. I took 1 year to create the drone and the sensor box, and after that I took another year to research materials to reduce methane emissions and complete my research paper and get recognition from awards. After, in late when I was in grade 10, the later part of the year, and also in early grade 11, I started researching for landfill opportunities where I can go and implement my solution.
Right. And do you have any projects ahead of SenseFly? Anything else that you're working on that's interesting?
So basically, in the starting of this year, actually started with another project called Project Aqua Region. So what this is a multi-layered filtering system which filters grey water specifically in areas which are scarce in water and have high population density. So basically, it has a coarse mesh, zeolite. I've used it here as well. I've used activated charcoal and gravel and sand. So these are the five materials I've used in this to filter green water. And after filtering, what I'm doing is that I've integrated IoT-based sensors here as well, which measure its pH, turbidity, and chlorine levels before and after the filtering process. After the filtering process, it sends the data to a machine learning model which predicts its use case scenario. For instance, if we have this much pH, then it is safe to use this filtered water for plants. Or if we have this much pH, then it can be used for washing. And that's how I'm planning to integrate with NGOs and deploy it at slum areas.
That is so inspiring. It's so wonderful to see a generation that is thinking on such lines to help solve real life issues. It's truly incredible. So, my final question to you, Bhrigu, is for all those students who want to make a difference and don't quite know where to start, what would you tell them?
In order to solve a problem, you just need to know the basics of technology of coding in a Raspberry Pi. You should start with the problems that already exist in your society and your community and just learn on the way. Because when I started in grade 9, I didn't really know how to make a drone, how to make and deliver such a large impact. I started, and eventually in the process, I learned it.
Thank you so much for being part of the Edexlive Podcast, Bhrigu. It was absolutely a pleasure to have you. So that brings us to another end of the Edexlive Podcast by the New Indian Express. Thank you so much for joining in. If you'd like to listen to more of our inspiring stories, log on to edexlive.com/podcasts or join us here on the Edexlive Podcast every Wednesday as we talk to brand new changemakers every week.